12 Days of Zentangle series. My name is Martha.
And I'm Molly.
Hi Molly. Hello. We will once again be using our Project Pack series to guide us through this annual tradition. So much fun.
Yeah, I actually love this. Is a good one.
This is the best.
Yeah. We say that every time.
I know. This year we'll be exploring techniques that play with dimension.
Yeah, kind of fun, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit different.
We will be using the materials from our Project Pack 16 envelopes, which you can purchase from Zentangle.com and some of our certified Zentangle teachers. If you do not have this particular project pack, we invite you to follow along with whatever materials you might have available to you at home.
And in case you were wondering, we do recommend watching the Project Pack 16 intro video prior to this one. It's just helpful to have.
Yeah, we go over a bunch of
some extra
things.
Stuff around. And then all the other videos in this series can be viewed in any order.
But perhaps you are viewing them right on the day it's released, and we're all excited, and we're going to be kind of following along together. But yes. Whenever you're watching this, welcome, and let's have some fun. All right, so as we said, I'm going to be using my Project Pack number 16 envelope with all the tools and tiles. And for this particular lesson, I'm going to be using most of the tools inside, all of those here. I'm not sure about the silver and white, but I might use them for accents. So I just have them with me just in case. So I'm gonna keep those right nearby. And then I'm gonna be working on a white Zendala, but I'm using a square just for measuring some things out. So it could even be a square with already tangled stuff on it. We're not tangling on it. I'm just using it to help me measure my spacing out. So those are the tools I'm going to be using. And as usual, I like to kind of honor the first step in the Zentangle method by just getting my space ready and sort of taking a moment for myself for gratitude and appreciation. And I invite you to do the same. So once you have all your tools ready and your space organized, I invite you to either find a focal point or maybe gently close your eyes and just pay attention to your breath for a minute. And think about something that you're feeling grateful for in this moment. Then allow yourself to just focus on your breath. Allow the breath to awaken and calm. And use that tool throughout this lesson at any point in time. If you need to take a break or just want to take a moment to see what you're doing, just remember that the breath is always there. All right, so we're going to begin by sort of laying out our tile on the back side of this Zendala. And as I said before, we're going to be using a square tile to help us sort of find how to divide this Zendala into 4 equal parts. And there's so many different ways to do this. This is just a quick way for us to do it. If you want to try a different way, then go for it. I just don't want to fold it before I score it. So I think we're going to be exploring different ways to do this in all of these videos. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mark my Zendala right where you can see this, the tiles underneath it. Maybe I should show you. So I have my square tile underneath it. I just put the Zendala on top so that the little corner points kind of stick out. It's just a fun way to figure that out. So I'm going to mark it right where those corners are. And then I'll have sort of the 4 points there. And it's not exact, but we don't need it to be exact in this particular situation. So I'm all done with the square tile. And I'm actually going to use the edge of my envelope, my project pack envelope, to as a straight edge. You don't even need, anything crazy. And I like to draw this with a pencil first. So I'm just going to draw a line from the top to the bottom line, right through the middle. And then we're going to be using this bottom point as our kind of starting point for the next series of lines. So the next line I want you to do is take the one on the the left side and the bottom and draw a line connecting those two. And then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So we have something like this. Now just by eye, so this doesn't have to be exact, I'm going to look at this space right here between my, my mark on the right side and the top, and I'm going to divide it in half, just visually. And then I'm going to divide it in half here and here. So it kind of gives you equal spaces in that section. And like I said, I just did that by eye. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to go over to the other side between the top and the left side. I'm going to kind of guess where the middle is. I don't know, maybe right there. And then divide that in half and that in half. All right, so should have kind of some markings that seem to be kind of equally dispersed up there. We're going to leave this section plain down there. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw from that bottom place. I'm just going to draw lines to those points. So starting from the same space on the bottom each time. So kind of getting like a fan shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So as you can see, I took my time and I started from this bottom point, and then I drew lines going out to all of those marked places. It does not need to be exact, so don't worry about it being perfect. It's going to work out probably no matter what, if give or take. But you're trying to get this sort of fan-like thing going on. So now I'm going to use my scoring device, and when I'm using this, I like to get like something to put underneath because I don't want to score my table. So I just have like a notebook, like a pad that I'm going to put underneath it so I can work on top of it for a minute here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to retrace over those pencil lines. I guess you could have done it without the pencil lines, but I use the pencil lines as a guide and I find it to be kind of helpful. So I'm just going to, again, start from that bottom point. And I'm going to use the smaller scoring device, but if you like to use the big one first and then go back in with the small one, it's up to you. So what I like to do is do a very light one first, and then I'll do it lightly like 3 times. Because sometimes going really hard can make your hand slip. So I did it like just 3 times, sort of lightly, adding a little bit more pressure each time. And that way, if you've ever used an X-Acto knife, you would kind of do the same thing. Instead of putting so much pressure down all in one swoop, the first light one kind of allows you to have a track to fall into. And then after that, you can do a couple more nice score lines. So I'm going to go ahead and score all of these lines. Just remember to take your time, and you can of course pause the video as you're doing your work and then come back to it. And a lot of times we suggest kind of watching it through and then going back and doing it at your own pace. I'm going to flip over my tile, and you can probably faintly see those scores that I did, but I am going to fold them a little bit to get us started, and then we're going to start tangling. So I am going to just very gently fold. And just because I'm doing this to sort of allow us to visually be able to see the spaces, and then we'll go back and maybe make the folds more prominent if we need to, but as of right now, oops, sorry, I'm off camera. Just gently folding taking your time. All right, so as you can see, you get like sort of a conical shape. It's kind of cool. But we're gonna revisit sort of the shape it creates afterwards. And for right now, we're gonna flatten our tile back out. We can get rid of this extra surface to work on. And we will start tangling. Thank you, Molly. This is definitely making my mind wander and think about all different possibilities of what this might end up as. So I'm pretty excited here. Okay, so for my tangling, I think I'm gonna flip this tile on its other end here so that I have the larger areas at the bottom. And we're going to take each one of these cone-shaped sections and isolate them and do something different in each one. So let's see, I'm gonna choose to work in this section here. And I think the easiest way to help us define that is to, with the black pen, right here, I have the black micron pen. I'm going to just kind of gently isolate this section with my pen so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm really going lightly, following the fold that you've just created. Sometimes there's some shadows play with your sight. There, so we have a section to work in. And now I'm going to deliberately, with my pen, divide this space in half. So starting at the top and slowly dividing it in half. And I'm gonna create I would say it's a Knightsbridge variation or a checkerboard variation. So from this bottom corner here, I'm gonna draw a slanted line like this. And then I'm gonna skip a space and draw one like that. So I'm creating about a bit of a trapezoid shape. I'm gonna continue up this column. I'm gonna skip a space and draw one this way. Skip a space this way, skip a space. And gets a little dicey up at the top, but you'll figure that out. And then this side is a little bit easier. I'm gonna do the opposite. So this one's gonna come down this way. Skip a space this way. There. And now we're going to ink in every other space, and you can start anywhere you like. I tend to like to start with the big one, and we all have our own rhythm of filling things in. I kind of like to define the edges and work my way in. This pen is pretty good for filling in larger spaces. I think with this blank surface, it's kind of fun to really put our marks down first with some bold shapes and lines. So I'm gonna skip this one and now color this one. And once we get our lines down, you know, this part is fairly easy. We can just enjoy that inking in process, sort of sculpting our spaces as we go. And now we'll start from the bottom here and we'll be filling in the opposite sides. I'm gonna try to get right to the edge with my ink. I'm really liking just this slight variation. It's it's sort of part jonquil, part Knightsbridge.
A little hybrid, yeah, I actually
Yeah,
agree with you
just
there.
a little bit different. There, all filled in. And, you know, I think a lot of times with these borders, sometimes you can go back and just sculpt a little bit on the edges. A tiny bit of ink there just gives the illusion that this is perhaps wrapping around. It's so subtle, but that small amount of sculpting just furthers the dimensional illusion, I guess you'd call it. And you can leave it as is, or I think I might just add just a little detail. And I'm going down just where the long side is in the center. Like that.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna let that dry. Anytime you put down heavy ink like that, you wanna just let it be before you agitate it at all. And I'm gonna isolate another section here and work on something a little bit different. And we're all familiar with printemps. I may even just do this a little bit on the back here. Familiar with our, very lovely spiral of printemps. So I'm gonna mimic that idea, but work with straight lines and do a square variation. Like that. So pick another column, and I think I'll just pick one over on this side here. And I'm not going to trace the edges for this one, but if you feel like that works for you, you certainly can feel free to do that. I'm just going to start with my square printemps. And then each time I draw a new one, I'm just gonna tilt my tile just ever so slightly. And of course, drawing it behind any one that comes up next to it. Behind that one, and not going over the edge. There's that one. Sometimes they're a little larger than the one that you just drew. Again, this is just a slight variation of an old familiar tangle, but giving it a completely different result. So now these are getting a little smaller as we work our way up to the corner here.
There actually is a tangle, Martha, I think that has those similar shapes in it, although they're oriented a little different. A tangle called Ambler.
Oh,
lesser
right.
known
Ambler
tangle,
is from,
yeah.
that's from a long time ago,
yeah.
yes.
Some of these early tangles that, so much has changed with Zentangle since then, but it was there, it had a name.
Right. So I got a little creative at the top there. And of course, this is very cool. Once we shade it, it could be just perfect as is, but I do love the effect of weighting. So I think I'm going to add some weighting to each one of these square shapes.
Yeah, good call, Martha.
And I think it really helps further adding dimension and...
Well, it just adds love, I think. It
Well, there's that.
shapes it, sculpts it.
Yeah. And also weighting, you get kind of creative with ink, and it always works out. It just always works out. So I'm really being random with where I shade it, but I pick a corner and then do the same orientation on each one of these square shapes. But every time I do one, I change it up a little bit. Weighting is a technique that really utilizes that takeoff and land so that you have a smooth transition between lines and then a gentle inking in. Just adding a little curve of ink, almost like a shadow. So we're taking these square shapes, and by adding the rounding, of course, by just saying the word, you realize we're adding a softness to the straight lines. It's kind of nice. Turning my tile this way and that. Each time you put down these darker, more dramatic lines, it's another opportunity for your eyes to jump around and see what's there. There. So you could also take, these small spaces that are left and maybe add another line that might be behind. And then maybe ink in any space that cries out to you. All right. So I'm gonna ask Molly to come in and add a few more tangles to our blossoming creation here.
It's looking good, Martha.
All right, so I am going to add something to our little project here, and I'm gonna do sort of a variation of a tangle we call perk. Perk usually has these beautiful bands that kind of wrap around a space, and then they have these orbs that fit in. And I'm gonna get a little crazy with it and have my bands kind of go in different directions. So you can watch me here for a minute and then follow along when you're ready. So I'm gonna start at the bottom so we can visually see it a little bit better. And I'm gonna create a band that sort of stretches from one side to the other. I like to have a little bit of a hook on the end, and then I'll kind of hook it around the end there. And usually in perk, we would keep them all going in the same direction. And for fun, I'm going to have my band sort of go in a different direction and kind of be a little random on how they, the distance between them. And if you want to hang on until I get to the next step to see what I want to do with this, then you can do that too. So again, my little bands, instead of all going in the same direction, they're a little bit wonky. Call this crazy perk. Just slowly working my way up the shape. Kind of gets a little dicey as you get near the top, but maybe I can fit one more in. And I think I'm gonna leave the bottom just as is. So I kind of have these bands going in different directions. And what I like to do is we're basically gonna smushing these orbs in between these bands, but I like to start where the space is a little bit narrower. Like, so for instance, start on this side, start here, start there, and then put in our orbs from there. So I'm gonna start over here with a smaller orb, kind of smushing it in there, and then gradually putting these orbs that kind of smush behind one another, almost as if they're like barely fitting in there. And then I like to ink in the little space between. Just take your time. There we go. So on this next one, I'm going to start over here on this side where the space is a little bit smaller than the rest of it. And again, I'm just smushing these orbs in there, one kind of falling behind the previous one. And then this one kind of fading into the side. All right, let's do another one together. Start on this side where it's a little smaller, and then just smushing these orbs in. Turning your tile as you work. It looks good next to that one, I like it. So yeah, that's Perk, Crazy Perk, and we kind of smushed all those orbs in there. And I'm going to add another orb like Tangle over here, I think. That's a little bit different. And this Tangle is called Jetties. Jetties is just basically creating a circle reticula and then just filling it with these sort of whimsical stripes. So if you want to follow along with me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a giant orb that really fits the space all the way working on my way up. So I'm going to put an orb right at the bottom here. Again, that kind of smushes into that shape. Almost like what we did right here, but in a filling that whole space. Kind of letting each one fall behind the previous one. And then we're going to just, first, I like to ink in those little spaces in between. It kind of lets the orbs pop off the page. If you can't see the score line very well, just turn your tile in a different light and you can usually see it. All right, so the next step for jetties is to create these sort of big stripes through the center. And I like to make mine on a little bit arc so it almost looks like it's wrapping around, almost like a pool cue. Is that the right term? Not a pool cue, a pool ball, yeah. Like a pool ball. So it has a nice wide stripe through the center. And then I like to make a little aura ink stripe on either side. And you could ink in this middle stripe, but I'm gonna just do a little variation, and I'm gonna put just some fine lines going through the middle just to change it up a little bit.
Really, jetties are just a series of orb reticulas, right? You can fill these with anything, any fun, you can make them all different.
Totally change it up, yeah. So just for whimsy and fun, I'm going to change up how the stripes go. So they seem to be going in all different directions. And as we said, you can obviously ink this all the way in if you wanted to, just doing these fine stripes as a fun variation.
You could do doodah in there also.
Oh, that would be fun too.
Depending on what size you're working with.
So I think I'm going to add one more here and then pass it back over to Martha. And I think I'm going to do a tangle we call shattuck, right in this little smaller space right over here. So shattuck is a really cool tangle. It kind of reminds me of bamboo, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is going to be a little tricky because I'm going to start at the top and you might not be able to see what I'm doing very well right when I begin. But I encourage you to just watch for a minute, and then once you understand, you can follow along. So to start off with, I'm going to do a series of parallel lines that are going on a diagonal. And like I said, you're not going to be able to see this very well right in the beginning because we're in a little space. So I did a series of parallel lines going diagonal. Now I'm going to turn my tile and I'm going to do a series of parallel lines going perpendicular to those ones in the other direction. So they should kind of, and I put a slight curve to them, but they're diagonally, and as I said, as I get further down here, you'll get to see. So each series of lines are going kind of in opposite directions of each other. Just a series of diagonal parallel lines. And what you're doing is you're kind of filling this triangular space that you create, almost like a curtain. Probably starting to understand. So again, a series of these, and you want your lines to be similarly spaced. And turning your tile this way and that, back and forth. There are different ways to do shattuck, but this is how I like to draw it. Some people like to first draw the bottom line and then fill it upward, but I think this way is easier for me. What I was trying to do in this series is like just trying to even out tangles that had kind of more texturing to more open tangles. So we didn't think about it too much, but when we picked out our tangles, we were like, oh, maybe we'll put this one next to this one so they kind of make each other stand out.
It's a pretty good practice for any composition, really.
Right? So, you know, this shattuck has a lot of fine line work done, whereas the jetties is kind of more open space stuff. I'm loving this composition so far, and so I'm trying to think of maybe something a little bit more open and spacious, which sometimes feels simple in a good way, but also it gives you that opportunity later on for maybe some more intense shading, things like that. So
it even like sort of makes the other tangles kind of stand out.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about balance. So I am going to work in this middle space here, and I'm just going to do a very basic fragment. And as it is a triangular space, triangles fit, or three-sided shapes fit very well here. And kind of playing off of this edge here that Molly drew, I'm going to draw a diagonal line down there, creating my first triangle. And I think I'm going to define the triangle here. Carefully along the bottom edge as well. And the next triangle, there. Again, wherever you have that opportunity to connect something, I think it's fun to do that. I'm gonna define this triangle here. This one has a line already. And there we go. Working my way up. Kind of wanting to play along that with that line right there. Always taking the time to care about the simple strokes just as much as the more elaborate strokes. So we've naturally created these three-sided reticula, if you will, just going back here and defining the edges of any of the triangles that didn't have an edge. Here's one here. And I'm going to create what the result of is sort of a faceted look. So we just are going to put a center dot in the middle of the triangle and then a line to each of the corners. And then again, a dot in the center, and then a straight line to each of the corners. Turning my tile and always having that relaxed hand. And it's fun to see this faceted, almost star-like shapes happening here. Focusing on these smaller areas here, trying to keep the facets extending there. So I'm going to leave that for now till we pick up our pencils. So I've got 2 more spaces left over here. And so I'm going to work in this one right next to our fancy little nice bridge that we did. And I'm going to do some hollabah. I feel like no tile is complete without some hollabah. And we've done...
It's a great tangle.
It is a super tangle. And I'm going to do just a variation. We've done it before together where I do the hollabah bands. So we will stretch from one side to the other with 1 bar, 2 bars, and then I am going to add a third bar.
Crazy, Martha. That's
It's
crazy.
so crazy. If you wish, you can add an extra oomph of ink to that third one. It's certainly not necessary.
But it makes a difference. It actually does add to the way
It's
you
just,
see it,
yeah, it's the dimension that we're looking for. So you turn your tile a little bit, and again, we're going to extend from one edge to the other. 3 aura lines, and then that third one, just adding a little bit more ink to it. So I'm getting close to the end, or what I foresee as the end, and because we're using these 3 bar bands, the space fills up a little bit quicker. Or perhaps yours are a little closer together. Also, by retracing this third line, you have the opportunity to straighten out a line, perhaps, if it wasn't as straight as you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave it. I think that's it for me. All right, so we have one more cone-shaped space left, and I'm going to ask Molly to come and fill that in. All right, so I'm looking at what we have here, and we have like a nice collection of different spaced out things. We have different types of tangles, and I'm gonna finish this last space with a super simple tangle, but I think it'll add some contrast and be a good way to finish off. So maybe I'll start down this end so you can see what I'm doing. It's basically a variation of tipple, and I'm gonna draw an orb, and then I'm gonna draw another orb inside it and fill that in. And I'm just going to continue creating these tiny orbs, inner aura, ink it in. You can vary the shape, the size of them you want, like a little bit. This will add contrast and texture, and it's a nice little meditation to sort of zone out into these little orbs. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this whole space with this little tipple variation. We're going to now add some shades to our series here. And I think for the most part, I'm just going to add some dark shading on the edges. I'm going to leave that first one for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to do anything with it. But in this hollow ball, I'm going to add a little dark shading on either side. And I like to kind of buff it out as we go along. Leaving that center part unshaded. Yeah, I'll add a little bit on this one, not too much. I'm gonna do a much thinner line on this one, I think. Don't you think, Martha?
Yeah, well, there's so much drama going on already, but just a little bit, just to add the tone, the gray tone.
Yeah.
Seeing how she's being careful not to add any graphite to all that ink.
Yeah, you do.
Doesn't obviously need any.
Doesn't need it, and it can sometimes agitate the paper a little bit. So, and I really wanted to hang on to some of that white part, so I was pretty careful when I used my tortillon on that one. Doing the same. I take a lot of time with shading. I try not to rush through it because I think it really adds to your tile. It's a process that I think is worth investing in because it really changes the way your tile looks.
And don't be afraid of it.
I know, right?
I think that's also is, you've put all your heart and soul into putting down ink, and I can see how it can be nerve-wracking to think that you might damage it, but I mean, if you just go at it with an open heart, and it usually really works out, and it just adds to your. As long as you leave white space,
right,
you're good to go.
And I'm just adding another layer of graphite to these, just the top of where these orbs are. Just experimenting with that. See how that does. Maybe not so much when we get up to the top. Yeah, be thoughtful of when all those tangles kind of fall together because there's a lot going on up there. Just inviting in the graphite into the, oh, what a difference. Look at the left side tangles versus the ones we haven't done yet.
It's a good before and after.
So again, I'm just putting down a nice, kind of pretty heavy layer of graphite right on the edge. Trick is to not go too far in, so you don't want to lose that white highlight in the middle. Again, leaving that center unshaded, keep that highlight right in the middle. With the balls, I think that I'm gonna play with this overlap here for fun. Using the point of my pencil. I actually like to use a nice sharp pencil when I shade because it gives me sort of that tool to have something to get right up to the edge. Maybe do the bottom too. Coming along, and then Shattuck's a fun one to shade. I think we'll go with the obvious and, well, maybe it's not obvious, but go with one of the ways that we often shade Shattuck is like putting this very cool shadow right at the bottom of every series. So you get this sort of overlapping look. And then again, just touching it with the tortillon, invite the graphite into the paper. Careful to leave sections not colored to get that highlight. Just do a little bit right here at the bottom, just for fun. Okay. Wow, that shading does a lot. Love it.
It's gorgeous.
This first one I didn't shade, but maybe if you want to add a little bit at the top, you could. Maybe a little at the edge. Okay, Martha, this looks fabulous, but wait, we're not done yet. All right, so now we have all our tangling done and we're ready to assemble our little, I guess you can call it an ornament, you can call it a decorative thing. It doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be seasonal. I actually think you could hang this all year long because it's very cool. So let's get ready. But I do have a piece of twine here and we are gonna be using some Mod Podge. So the first thing I like to do when I'm doing Mod Podge is put a piece of scrap paper down to work on top of. I'm gonna need, like I said, a piece of twine or a ribbon, a paper clip.
About 8 inches long, maybe?
Yeah, I would say.
8 to 10 inches.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe longer, yeah.
It's actually about 14 inches long, I think. But whatever you wanna do use for a hanging thing, and then I'm gonna be using my Mod Podge and a brush to apply the Mod Podge. So, I'm gonna take my twine, I'm just gonna tie a little knot in it. You could use ribbon, you could use whatever it is you want to use.
How'd you do that? So you
I just put a little knot in here.
All right, on the end. That's
yeah,
not...
so that you have a loop.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I'd have something like that. I'm going to revisit my beautiful tile here, and I'm going to kind of play with those folds again, very gently, to get it back into my conical shape. We had already done this before, so it should fall into shape pretty easily. And then the idea is that we're gonna kind of stick these two back pieces together so that you have sort of this cone shape and they're attached in the back. And I'm gonna do a little dry run here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put a little Mod Podge right here, then we're gonna close it up, and then I'm gonna take my paper clip and use that as a clamp. And I'm gonna put the paper clip right on here to hold the glue shut. And then, oops, sorry, hold the glue shut and then let it dry. So I'm gonna take my paper clip off, you can see it, undo it, you can see where that goes. And what we wanna do is put our little string thing in there when we actually apply the glue, close it up, apply the glue, put the paper clip on, and ideally you could probably just lie it like this and let it dry, or you can hang it up somewhere. Okay, you guys ready? I think you can do it. All right, so I'm going to actually just leave my little hangy thing in there. So I just have it kind of there. And I am this time going to put a little bit of Mod Podge just on my paper somewhere so that I can apply it. I just don't need much.
You could even use your finger to put it on. You don't need maybe don't even need to.
Oh, you want me to go a little crazy?
Yeah, I think because you maybe want to save your brush because we're not going to use it again for a little bit.
I mean, if you want to use your brush, you can try it. So, but Martha's encouraged me to use my finger. Notice how she didn't say use her finger. She wanted me to use my finger, which is a little messy.
I'm going to keep my fingers clean and you can get yours all Mod Podge.
So I'm putting some Mod Podge right there. And it's okay if you get it over because we're going to be Mod Podging the whole thing. And I'm just wiping my finger off on the paper. And remember, you want your little stringy thing inside. And then we're going to overlap just at the top. It's not going to overlap on the bottom, but if you have extra Mod Podge on there, that's fine. And I'm going to use my paper clip to clamp them together. And you might just even kind of press it together with your fingers to start off with. I didn't tangle these two spots because to me that's kind of like the back, but if you wanted to tangle them, you could. That's up to you. Before you glue or after you glue. And I'm just kind of hand pushing it with my fingers and then just making sure the paper clip is on there in a way that it kind of keeps it for a bit. So it probably takes a little bit to dry. It doesn't have to be 100% dry. It just has to be dry to the touch for us to then put the Mod Podge on the outside. So let's let it dry. All right, so we've just had some lunch and
plenty of time to let it dry.
Let it dry for about an hour. And now we are ready to Mod Podge the tangled side of our decorative cone here. So I am going to kind of add to my little pile of Mod Podge here so that I can dip my brush. And I have my brush ready. So I'm going to now remove paper clip carefully. And I'll probably use this space here to hold on to as I work my way. So I'm sort of holding on right here for now. And with my brush, I'm going to work in smooth strokes.
And you kind of don't want to overwork stuff with the Mod Podge because you can start to muddy things up. So you kind of want to get the Mod Podge on there and then you can always put on a second coat. So.
And some of the stroke lines that you see will disappear as it dries as well. And then once your tangled surface is covered and you want to just check for any drips anywhere, any blank spots, kind of hold it in the sun. I'm now going to hold on to the string, or actually you can just put your fingers inside here, that works too. And cover the untangled space. There, isn't she lovely?
Mm-hmm.
So then you'll be able to hang it on a tree or in a window, or you can even fill it with something.
Right.
Do you want to show the other one too?
Yeah, sure. And I think on the back spaces where we left untangled, you could probably put like the year or more tangles in there.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it is you want to.
Or make a friend.
I know, right?
Yeah, so we did some similar ones on this one here, just playing around with things. I'm sure you'll have some wonderful ideas too on variations. So there we have it, our little tangled tree cones.
Tree cones. I love them. I think they're great. That was fun, Martha.
That was super duper. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.